Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Power of Collaboration for Data Science Teams, a RapidMiner server showcase. I'm Haley Matissa with RapidMiner, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. I'm joined today by Tom Ott, our marketing data scientist here at RapidMiner. Tom will get started in just 1 minute, but first a few housekeeping items for those on the line. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive a link to the on-demand version via email within 1 to 2 business days. You're free to share that link with colleagues who are not able to attend today's live session. Second, if you have any trouble with audio or video today, your best bet is to try logging out and logging back in, which should resolve the issue in most cases. Finally, we'll have a question and answer session at the end of today's presentation. Please feel free to ask questions at any time via the questions panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll leave time at the end to get to everyone's questions. I'll now pass it over to Tom.
Thank you, Haley. Good morning, everybody. I'm excited to be here to talk to you today about the power of collaboration using RapidMiner Server. Now, RapidMiner Server is something that was created pretty much to start collaboration many years ago when it was first incubated in Dortmund. It was really to help the internal team organize libraries of processes and models and so forth and quickly share them instead of passing around a USB stick or some other, or emailing the processes to one another. So really, RapidMiner Server, the base was started in collaboration. So let's go down here. So today's agenda, we're going to do an introduction, then we're going to do an overview of RapidMiner Server, and then we'll go with the demo. Of course, as Haley mentioned, we'll leave some time for Q&A, which I'm pretty excited about to hear your questions on it. So let's do the introduction. Where does RapidMiner Server fit into our ecosystem? Well, if you see here at the top under Design, we have RapidMiner Studio. You can't really offload processes or do your modeling or productionalize things on RapidMiner Server without RapidMiner Studio. And really, RapidMiner Studio is the design tool where you build your processes, put them on the collaboration server, and then allow your colleagues or your boss or whoever it is to review your processes, test your models, and so forth. Of course, we also have below RapidMiner Studio the RapidMiner Redupe environment, which also works really nicely with RapidMiner Server too. So what is RapidMiner Server? Well, I touched upon the first thing. It's a collaboration engine, a place where you exchange models, test them, write processes that you can reuse over and over again by your team and so forth. It's also a compute engine. It allows you to crunch larger data sets. And by that, what I mean is that RapidMiner Server could sit on its own independent server. You could load it with as much memory as you want, 64 gigs, 128 gigs, 32 gigs if you want to go small, and use that to pull in larger data sets from databases or from other places and crunch them in the memory of the RapidMiner Server environment. And finally, it's a deployment engine. It's where you expose REST APIs, web services, build some dashboards and so forth. We're not going to focus so much on the compute and deployment part of today's webinar. They'll be part of another webinar coming up in the future. But we will talk a little bit about dashboarding, which is part of the deployment engine, which you can use to quickly visualize your results with your team. So why collaboration? Well, I've already touched on a few of those things at the beginning. It's really the ability to share data sets and data connections from databases and so forth. It's also the ability to create and share processes and models. I could create a process on my RapidMiner Studio, save it to the server, give my colleague Jeff in Texas access rights to view it and to test it, and my colleague in Germany, Martin, may have developed a model which I can use and score new data on my side of the pond. Okay? And also, it allows you to create and work in groups and build libraries. Now, we typically always work in a team. We typically work on projects. So what happens a lot of times is people will use the server to create a group, a working group, or for a project group. And everybody on the team is provided access, and they can build their processes, share their data, do all that type of work. And then also, interestingly enough, create their own set of libraries. They can create global libraries, meaning that everybody in the office or on the team or in the company can use a predefined set of processes. Normally, this is done for best practices. For instance, the example I will give, if you work in one company, they may have a specific naming convention for their data or their data tables. And so you can build bits of processes that you could always reuse for every type of thing that you do, like maybe ETL, or maybe you use a standard type of modeling technique using, say, logistic regression and so forth. So you can build these libraries together and then drag and drop them in as you do your work or your team's work. Okay, so quick overview on RapidMiner Server. We're going to do some general and some technical review over it is. It can be installed on Linux, on Windows, any types of Unix-based type of system. It runs, it needs a database as a backend, and this database is really used for RapidMiner Server to do its backend stuff. Storing data, storing your processes, running cron jobs, and so forth. It does support LDAP and Active Directory. So I will show an example of how we create a user in a manual way, but if you have LDAP or Active Directory, you can merge that together with Server and do it very effortlessly. And of course, the best part about what RapidMiner Server can do is you can offload a process that you built on your laptop in RapidMiner Studio, or even a Hadoop big data process, and then save it to the server, and then click Run on the server, thereby freeing up your machine to do other tasks. And like I said, it also has some native dashboarding capability, mostly HTML5 based and some older versions it supports as well too. So technically, it runs on Java 8. It runs on the JBoss system. Like I said, the database backend, it could be actually be open source, like PostgreSQL or MySQL. It could also be proprietary, like Oracle or Microsoft SQL Server. As long as you have a JDBC driver, you could pretty much use any database as the backend, provided you make a couple of tweaks to some XML files. And like I said, it can be installed anywhere in your corporation, as long as you have an IP address, which you can then log into. So for instance, in today's example, I will be showing you a local installation of RapidMiner Server that's on my laptop, and I have full admin rights to it. And that happens to be at my local host, port 8080. However, when we're doing the demo, I will be showing you a connection to a server that sits in Dortmund, Germany. It actually will have a URL. In this case, it's sales.rapidminer.com, and there'll be some credentials that I can log in. So really, that server can sit anywhere in your company. You could have your team of data scientists, say, in Moscow, and you could have the server sitting in San Francisco, and you may have a team in Texas that logs in to consume the models that your team in Moscow has created. It's that flexible. As long as you've got an internet connection, you can put it anywhere, or an internal data, an internal connection network. And best of all, it's a very simple installation process. Okay? As long as you have your database, you have Java 8, it really is an 8-step process to install the server. Okay, with that, I'm going to now take a moment to pause this and switch screens into RapidMiner Studio and also into the web interface of the server. So if you just bear with me for a second. While I'm switching this. Okay. You should all see RapidMiner Studio. My assumption for today's call is that a lot of you have already been using RapidMiner Studio or are aware of RapidMiner Studio's interface. The question is, why am I showing you RapidMiner Studio? If you go back to one of the first slides I showed where server sits in the ecosystem, and I made the comment that you need Studio to interact with RapidMiner Server. That's mostly true. You can access RapidMiner Server through the RapidMiner Studio interface, or you could actually access it through the web interface. So we'll do both. We'll do the overview, since I have admin rights to my local server. And then we will then do the connection to the German server. So let's just do real quick. If you're using RapidMiner server, you know that over here on the left typically is where you have your repositories. A repository is a place where you save local data, where you have your processes and maybe other different things. And typically, if it's stored locally, you should see like a little HD screen here over here, like a little TV screen. And the way we typically always add a new repository is we come over here, we click on the pull-down menu, and we create repository. If you've done this several times and you click here, you'll see two choices. Normally, if you don't have RapidMiner server, you should still have this option to select here, but it won't go anywhere. Most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, if you don't have server, actually 100% of the time if you don't have server, you will use a new local repository. But if you do now have a server running, you would click on here, you would go through next, you would give it a name, new server or something like that. You would get the URL, which is something you would get from your server admin, a username, a password, and so forth. So for instance, since I'm using localhost 8080 and I have admin rights, if I were to now, if I correctly enter my password and I click on check connection status, if I can make a connection with it, I should get a success button, which I have here. And if I don't, it'll give me a red X. So that's really a great way first to test to see if you can connect your studio into RapidMiner server. So I'm going to cancel out on that. So how does it look when I actually make a connection? Well, I'll scroll down here to the bottom. If I make a connection to a server, I'll get a different icon. You see right down over here, I have 3 server connections. Oops. And one is my local server, which you'll see I just clicked on it and I expanded it. It says local server. It says it's connected. And I have a bunch of folders. Right? I have a group folder, a home folder. If I look over here, I can see that I have admin, that happens to be me, where I store some of my processes and so forth in here. And I also have a couple of other users, which I created for this particular demo webinar today. A webinar folder, a webinar backup folder, and so forth. I also have 2 other connections. One is to my internal data warehouse, and another one is to my German server, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. And you can see here, if I just click on that and expand it here, it'll go ahead and refresh. It's now traveling through the internet through a VPN, I guess, and over to Germany, and now refreshing all these different folders. Okay. So this is a very simple way of actually interacting with a server through Studio. Okay. You can access it through the web. So let's go pull that up. So I'm going to come over here to my web browser, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my local host, type in 8080 for my port, and I'm presented with the login screen here. If I click on login, you should be presented with this. Now, every user on RapidMiner Studio, every user for RapidMiner server will have access to this type of screen. Okay? However, depending on your access rights, you may or may not see a bunch of folders over here, a bunch of toggle places you can toggle onto. When I log into the German server, you'll see that the administration panel will pretty much mostly be blank. But as admin here, you have full control over everything. So let's just explore these little tabs over here. Click on repository. Well, just like what repository means, it's a place for you to look at what you, in your account, have loaded up to the RapidMiner server. I can click on Browse Repository, click on that. Now I'll see all these different folders and so forth over here that I've been working on. I can take a look at maybe what's in this folder here, HV stocks. You can see that I have more subfolders. Let's run processes. And I can come over here and I can do a couple things. I can maybe click on this, and if I do, it should show you the representation of an XML file, what the XML file would look like over here. It loads in a second. I can refresh. I can rename them over here on the right. I can even download it, or I can set certain permissions over here. And we'll talk about permissions in a few minutes. And I can do different things as well too. I can run the process on the server. I can even upload a new version. And of course, I can always check the history. Part of that version and control that RapidMiner server also has. So this is a very kind of manual way to interact with it, but it allows you to do some finer tuning if you need to do that as an admin or somebody who has the rights to do that. And of course, I can always click here and search for processes if I happen to lose one. So the next one here is processes. Here's where we start doing some more advanced things. And these are the things that we will talk about in a deployment webinar, but for the most part, we'll just touch on these real quick. Here's my process scheduler. I can take a look and I can see which processes are currently running, which ones are croned. In this case, I have nothing croned here. You can see which processes I've broken, ironically quite a bit, and which ones have actually successfully processed with a green check mark. And of course, I can always look at the log file over here if I wanted to see what went wrong or what went right and so forth. Next, we have services. This is also a deployment feature. This is where I create REST APIs and web services. And last but not least, I also have something called triggers, where RapidMiner server can monitor folders or wait for an email attachment in order to trigger some process down the line. And last, let's take a look at the administration. And this is where you now start to do user management and groups and so forth. So let's just take a look at this. Now, if you actually have an LDAP or Active Directory, you'll actually have a little more functionality over here. I don't have that incorporated for this webinar, but we can create a very simple user. So what we'll do is we'll create a user named webinar1234. We'll give them a password. Check the password again. Display name webinar234, and then hit submit. Okay. And now it should be created. And you'll see here, right now, that webinar, the new user has been created. And you'll see that this person is assigned to several different groups automatically. He's assigned to an analyst group, execute group, report editor, so forth, and whatnot. Now, if I click on the Groups tab over here, RapidMiner server comes pre-populated with a few groups automatically. These are automatic groups. You can choose to use them or not, or you can create your own group. Like if I were to add a group over here, I would be able to come over here, okay, say yes, and create, a webinar group. Something like that. And it automatically creates a group. And then if I wanted to, I can come back to my user list here. I can toggle on webinar 1234, and then I can assign them to the group, like a webinar group, copy them over. If I don't want them to be part of the report editor and report manager and report viewer, I can remove them as well, and so forth. So you have that granularity to really, as the admin, to assign groups, to create groups, assign users, and either restrict them or give them access to a bunch of other groups and so forth. Very simple. What else do we have under administration? We have database connections. Very important. Here's where you actually connect your RapidMiner server to various data sources. You could do that through by creating a new connection entry. Let's say most of the time it'll be a database. You can see here there's a few of them that are populated with their drivers. And like I said before, if you have some database that has a JDBC driver that's not listed in the system, you can of course add it by appending an XML file on the RapidMiner server installation directory. You would go through the whole thing, you would then test it and see if it works. Now, sometimes, and the reality is we have different databases. Some have financial data, some have other sensitive material, and there may be certain people that are allowed to see certain data sources. You can actually restrict the access of databases and other connections through the use of access rights. Of course, if I were to come down over here, you could see that, let's just say webinar 1234, and anybody working in the webinar group could actually have access to that particular database. Very handy, and also some very fine-tuning that you can do on the back end. What's this connections over here? Connections is another thing that you could do, but these are more for things like things like Twitter or Salesforce or Dropbox or some other type of connection that you can create to some other external third-party type of program or application. And of course, then we have things like system settings and so forth, where you can then add different properties and so forth. There was a great blog post came out today on how you can actually add Python scripts and R scripting and set the path and the values and so forth today. So go check out rapidminer.com/blog for that entry. And another neat thing is these are more admin related tasks, but you can check on things like the operators and extensions that are installed on your machine. You can see here that locally I have a lot of stuff installed. And last but not least, system information. You can check the system load, you can look at some server logs and so forth, manage your preferences, manage your licenses, and so forth. Last but not least, if you do get stuck on anything, please go visit the documentation, docs.rapidminer.com, or if you have a support license, click on support to access one of our great support people. Okay. So that's just the web overview, diving into the server. Now let's actually get busy and get productive. For today's example, what I've done is I started with a local server. I started with a local repository. And what I was doing was I went to the Kaggle website and I downloaded an old Kaggle data set, which was the Walmart sales forecasting Kaggle event. And in there were a bunch of data sets. One of them was called features. One of them was called stores. And what I'm doing here now is I'm just purely working locally on RapidMiner Studio. We're going to now go from local to server and then finally end up with building some dashboards. So let's just take a look at this data. This is completely local right now. I'm going to wire it out. If you're familiar with RapidMiner, that's how you look at the results. Over here. And hit play. I'm going to pause here for a second. And I'm going to make a distinction that this play button means that you execute the process locally on your laptop or wherever your local machine is. If you have server running, you should see, if I pull this down, two additional options. Run process on server or schedule process on server. You'll see that they're grayed out right now. That's because this data and the process that I'm going to build happens to be local to my machine. It's not sitting on RapidMiner server. It will be shortly, but right now it's not. So let's just look at this data. So, okay, one of them, we have a bunch of store numbers, we have a type, whatever that means, we have a size, that's in the store data set. The retrieve features one has a date, some temperature, fuel prices, and so forth. And what we want to do is we just want to merge the data sets together. So I can do that locally here. I can just take a join operator, drag it in, make a connection, toggle off my ID as attribute as key, and then come over here, click on key attributes, and select store, and select store. Right. Very simple. I'm doing an inner join, and hit run. So now both those data sets are actually joined. Okay, that's local. Now could I go ahead and do this by running it on the server? Well, if I did that, I can't right now. I need to save this process to the server. So how do we do that? Let's scroll down. Let's go to Germany, because I'll be working in Germany on this. Let's go to groups. I created a group for this webinar. It's called Webinar Group. Under Webinar Group, I have already created 3 folders. Data folder, where I'm going to store the data. You can see here that I have nothing in here right now. A library, which I'll show you how we can use a library. I'm going to use a neural net to fit a trend line. And I also have some pre-populated processes here. Okay, but we're going to create a brand new process here. Let's go do a few things. So I could come over here, I can right-click on this and store this process here. We'll call this one join store and features. Once I do that, you'll see a couple things change. You'll see in the upper left part of the window, all of a sudden my path changed. Now it says Germany, webinar, groups, webinar, processes, O1 features. So now this is actually sitting on the server. And if I scroll down here, you'll see that it dropped it in at the bottom. If I right-click on this folder and I do a refresh, you'll see that it automatically then will alphabetize or put them in order this way. You'll see that it pops up in the top here. Now if I go ahead and do this, it'll give me two options, okay, to run process on the server or schedule it. So if I happen to do just run it, nothing happens. It doesn't look like it happened. I just see this little note down here that says successfully submitted to the process server, but how do I know if it ran correctly? Where did the data go? What's going on here? I don't see anything populating back into my window, right? Normally, right, we should expect to see something like the results. These are the old results. We should see 8,190 examples, and 14 regular attributes, and so forth, but we see nothing. We see nothing here. So what happened? And how can I figure out what happened? Well, I could go back to logging into my sales server. Let's come over here. I'm going to log out of this one. And I'm going to switch to one in Germany now. So in Germany, I have a different URL, and I have a different login name. So let's log in. And I can go check out my process scheduler, right? Remember, we've seen this before on how things run, and you can see right here, here's Ott, that's me. And I just ran this process, and it crashed. Okay, something is not right. It says reason requested repository does not exist. Okay, something's not right here. So, but what happens if I can't get to the internet? Can I actually see if a process crashed on the server? Yes, you can. What you would do is you'd come to your RapidMiner Studio, go to your view, show panel, and toggle on server monitor. I happen to have that toggled on down over here. So let's expand the one that says Germany. I'll take a second. Yep, there's my process. It says right here, this one that we just created failed. If I expand it, it says, the data, the server, the data is not available. So what's going on over here? Well, I saved the process to server. I executed on the server. And if I click on one of these data sources, you'll see that, it's referencing Server Collab, which is on my local machine. That's what's causing it to fail. Because if I turn off my computer and I shut down RapidMiner Studio and I cron job this, the RapidMiner server will try to, or well, it can't get back from the server into my local machine to pull that data, so it will crash. So that's what's giving you this warning now. It's saying, all right, guys, I can't access your local data. This is why it's not working. So we need to put the data on the server for it to use. So let's go do this. We can do this very, very simple. Here's another great way of going from local to your server environment. Let's scroll back down to Server Collab. I'm going to take my stores, Control-click, grab them both, copy them, scroll down, put them into my data folder, paste them in, should copy it over. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just delete these guys out, drag them in, and you'll see that they are completely relative path node, which is really what you want in a production environment. And now we can save it, and now we could run it again, and now we'll see, hopefully, if we did this correctly, a green check mark. And there we go. It successfully executed. But one thing that we don't have is the result. That's another thing that you need to know about RapidMiner Server, is you need to tell it how you want the result to be displayed or stored. If this becomes a cron job and I close things down, it'll execute, it'll do it perfectly, but it's not storing the data anywhere else. It's not putting the results anywhere that you can interpret them from. So what we need to do here is add a store operator. Store, drag it in, come here to my little folder, scroll down to my RapidMiner server in Germany, click on data, and what we'll call it is joined data. Okay, hit save again, and now let's run it on the process on the server. Successfully submitted. In a second we should see a second green check mark, success. And now if I came back over here to my data folder, right click and refresh. And there we have it. There's my new data source. Join data. Perfect. Excellent. Now, let's go do something cool with this. So the Walmart data set has fuel data, temperature data, all these different things. And what we're not going to do today is we're not going to really get into the heavy data science of seasonality and deseasoning things. We're just going to kind of focus on how you can build libraries next and how you can drag and drop and use different processes within the server and make things easier here for you and your team. So let's open this next one here. 02 aggregate store by average temperature. Open. Okay. You'll see here that it's all red. There's no data source because it was waiting for this data source. Okay. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to drag this data source in here, connect it all, so all the metadata now propagates and it's fine. You could see I'm still in the German server. The directory still says Germany. And what I can do now is two things. I can either run this locally if I so choose to, or I can run it on the server. We just showed you how to run things on the server, but what happens if you want to run it locally? Will it actually work? So if I click Run Now, it will work. But what's it doing is it's loading the data from the server, loading the process from the server, and then pulling the results into my local machine. Okay, so I can do that. Now, a word of warning to you all. If you're using very, very large data sets and you're bringing this across your network, this may take a while to do. I just happen to be using a small data set and it happens pretty quickly. The whole idea for the compute part of RapidMiner server is to do all the data lifting, do all the data crunching outside or somewhere else, and then bring the results that you can finally inspect locally back into RapidMiner. Trying to run the entire process and do all the large data crunching and try to bring it into RapidMiner Studio will probably drive you a little bit nuts. But you can do it if you lose the power of the server to do all the heavy lifting in the background and then just consume the results. So, okay, so this ran locally. And you can see here we have a bunch of stores. We calculated the minimum temperature at that store, the maximum temperature at that store, and the average temperature of that store. Very simple type of ETL work that we're doing. Okay. So if I ran this on the server again, I can do that too. Hit OK. We'll see a green check mark. What, right? We forgot to do one thing. We forgot to store it. Okay. Now I got to bring a store operator in. Move this guy out of the way. We're going to use him shortly. Come back down. Store the data again. And we'll call this store temperature temp. Okay. Excellent. Okay. We're running it locally. And guess what? We just ran it locally. We ran it locally. Did it store back to the server? Well, actually, yes, it did. There it is. So you do have some flexibility. When you're working in the server environment, and sometimes it kind of gets blurry, it's really meant to just be in the background to really help you do a bunch of things. So you just have to be aware of where the path goes and where you save data and do those different things. But it's really easy. I typically work mostly on the server. I load everything up. I save all my processes. I can run them locally. And when I'm done, I swap out smaller data sets for bigger data sets and just push it into the background and let the server run on it. So there's really cool stuff. You can effortlessly go between both environments, in some cases not even realizing that you're doing it. So now let's go look at the next one and talk about libraries. Let's open up fuel prices. Same thing. I have another process here that I need some data for, and I can drag the join data into here. Come over here. And if we were to run this locally, let's wire this out. We want to build a small trend line for the fuel data for fuel prices at store number 2. You can see here that the temperature at store number 2, the average was this, the fuel price average was this, over a time period, and so forth. Now, I can do some work. I can come over here and I can grab a fit trend operator and I can build all this, but somebody on my team in Germany has already created that for me. Go rewire this here. Somebody came over here and created a library folder and put a process in there that I could use. So I can take this and I can drag it out like this and drop it on here. And I can go ahead and hit run. Let's hit run. And if I look at the data again now, not only do I have store, the date, fuel price, and temperature, now I also have a trend value. And if I look at my charts, come over here, go to my series multiple chart, and then I can select trend and fuel price and look at it by the date as my index dimension. All right, very good. So how can you create libraries? Libraries are fantastic to create, and they really are. If I come over here, let's open this one up. It's really just, in this case, it's one operator. I just wire the input, and I wire out the output. I put this fit trend operator in here with a neural net, and because it's red, it means there's no data in here. So I can drag and drop this anywhere I want and connect it up to my other process. And I'll just digress for a minute. I want to show you some of the libraries that we as RapidMiner use quite a bit for our internal work or for whatever we need to do. We've created a very large library. We have things like process libraries that relate to missing attributes, Google Maps, things like connecting to desk.com, speech recognition, cross-validation. All of these are really just, if I look at them, if I open this one up here, are really just bits of code, bits of processes that can be used over and over again. Reporting components like buttons and file upload, server administration stuff, anything that a user or somebody has to be used over and over again. Instead of rebuilding it every time, you can drag and drop it into RapidMiner server. And really, that's the value of all this. That's the value of all this. Speed to market, save yourself time. Why reinvent the wheel? So let's just go back to our little demo here. Okay, so we have fuel prices here. We have a trend that we just created, but we haven't done anything to it yet. We haven't stored it. All right, we can run it on the server, which we do here. We should get a green check mark. But once again, we didn't tell it to save the results. So let's go wait a second here. And there we go, success. Let's go over here, let's go back to store operator. Fantastic. And let's go save it again. And we'll just say fuel. Trend. Great. You as a data scientist, you've done this work now. You're excited to show your findings. You're going to say, hey, my colleague Jeff Kawanis in Texas, I want you to check out this data source. Or I want you to check out this data here. Come over here, let's go refresh this. And I say, hey Jeff, if I right click on this, I say, let's edit the access rights here. I say, hey, I want you to check this out. He happens to be Jay Kawanis. I want you to just be able to read this data. But Martin Schmitz, who is my boss in Germany, I'm going to want him to do a couple things. Let's go remove this guy. I'm going to want him to have full access to everything in this folder. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to edit his access rights. And I'm going to say, M. Schmitz, where are you here? There you are. I want to grant you all read, write, execute, and so forth. So now Martin can come into every subfolder, look at every process, look at every model, but Jeff can only access this data source right here. So now my team can do different things with this. Jeff can only look at the data, but Martin can definitely work on anything. If he has something specific in this group, he could create another folder. You could say something like models. You can actually create a model folder and so forth and work from there. Okay? But reality is that sometimes looking at this data and it's kind of hard to do by just looking at it in a tabular form. Like I'd say if I wanted to look at this fuel trend data again. It's nice to look at it this way, right? But ultimately we want to see it maybe in this methodology, like so forth, like maybe like this. This is local to my machine. These are the visualization tools of RapidMiner Studio. Maybe somebody on my team doesn't have time to load up RapidMiner Studio or just wants to be able to see what we're working on or monitoring what we're working on. So how could we actually collaborate with them doing that? That's the way of the dashboarding, the internal dashboarding capability we have. So let's actually build a dashboard from this particular process here. And the way we do that is we do a couple things. I'm going to now enable these. And with dashboarding, it's very, very simple. What you need to do is you need to do a few things. Let's come over here. The simplest thing is you prepare the data in the format you want to visualize, and then you use a publish to app operator. In this case, I have two publish to app operators. One is going to publish my fuel price, and another one's going to publish the temperature of that store. Okay. So what we've done here is we've executed and created, if I did a, let's go do a temporary block, or sorry, breakpoint here. And when we stop this process mid-flow here, you'll see that we have a store number, a date, fuel price, temperature, and a trend. Okay. So we're going to create two visualizations. One is for the fuel price, and if I use my select attributes operator, I can see what I'm selecting to output there. It's going to be the date, the fuel price, and the trend. And on the bottom branch, I'm only just going to output the date and the temperature to my temperature visualization. And it's that simple. Come over here, click stop. Let's go run this on the server. Say yes. And now let's go visualize it. Now for that, we have to log into the web interface. Let's come over here, go to our app designer. On the bottom over here, click on app designer. And let's click on new app. Okay, we'll go over this in more detail on the deployment webinar. But for the most part, the simplest thing is this is very simple to building widgets. Come over here, the first thing you need to do is create an initialization process, which in this case happens to be that last process number 3 for fuel price. So we come over here, open up groups, open up webinar, open up processes, select fuel price, select location, run the initialization process, and then we come to layout. Click on layout. And here's where we build. This is a blank canvas, similar to a RapidMiner. You start with a blank canvas, and you add components. So we added a visualization one. Just you grab it by coming down here, clicking visualization, and then you click on the little edit button here to configure it. The neat thing about using the web apps, which is really cool, is that they already pre-populate when you run that initialization process. So if you remember, I had one called fuel price, and I had another one called temperature. Let's go back over here. If we did this correctly, we come down to subscribe to object, and you should see them right there. Fuel price, let's grab that one. It's going to be a HTML5 chart. It's going to be a series chart. In this case, the default is column. So if we click on refresh, let's take a look at this. Kind of a neat little visualization, but not in the format I want. So let's come back over here and change it. Change it to line. Let's hit refresh again. Much better. Now this is kind of what I want to see. So what we can do is come down here to click submit. Let's actually maximize this. Then I have one ready, and we're going to drag him out of the way. Let's go put a new visualization for temperature. Drag these guys together like this. And same thing, come to date, data, and format. and we will this time click on temperature, click on refresh, and we can just, in this case, get a bar chart of the temperature over time. If we look at index attribute, we can do the date, click on that, refresh, and it'll give me the dates and so forth. And when we're done, we can click on submit. We have our boxes, and finally we can click on preview, which will then be a dashboard that we could share with our colleagues. The way you would do that, you would do a couple things over here. You would be able to give people some access by giving them a link, like so forth over here. This is a protected link. They need to log in, provided that they have access or assigned access rights to this. And it's really, really that simple. So we save it. If we're done, come over here. Come over here. Let's see this. And I'm sorry, we go to groups. My bad. Go to groups, webinar, and let's just call it. Actually, no, we'll put it under app. Dashboard. Save it. And now if we go back to RapidMiner Server, I'm sorry, RapidMiner Studio, if we come back to the app directory, you should see that this is already saved in here and so forth. And then once again, I can do this. I can come here to edit access rights, and then I can assign different people to different groups to actually access it and so forth, read, write, and so forth. It's very, very simple. With that, I'm actually going to now open it up to question and answers. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Haley.
Great. Thanks, Tom. So as a reminder to our audience, we're going to be sending a recording of today's presentation within the next few business days via email. And like Tom said, go ahead and submit your questions via the questions panel on the right-hand side of your screen. I see we already have a couple questions coming in. So Tom, I'll go ahead and ask you the first question here.
Sure.
So this person is asking, since we can install this anywhere as long as we have internet connection, is it safe to assume that this is cloud-based?
You can put this on Amazon, like AWS for sure. Most of the time, I make a database connection to my DreamHost server for data, and I use my server running it that way on my local machine. So yeah, I mean, it's all you need is Java, and you need a place in it to install it to, and a backend database. So yeah, it could sit in the cloud if you wanted to.
Great, thanks. Another question here, are the data sets stored on the server accessible from outside without using an export process? What kind of formats are the data sets stored in on RapidMiner Server?
So there is the data, the local repositories, these little guys here, right here, are stored in the RapidMiner data format. What you can do is you can export them. If I come back over here, I'm trying to remember where it is here. You can export them, I think, as a CSV or as an XML if you wanted to, by coming to the browser, repository. Let's say browse them. Let's go see if we can actually do one right here. Come back over here. Let's see here. Yeah, I think there's multiple ways that if you click on the actual data set, let's go through this data set here, data, use the Irish one. You can then download it, I believe, yeah, you can download it here in different formats. You could download it as HTML, XML, ARFF, even as Excel and so forth. Yeah.
Great, thanks. One other question, does this integrate with front-end tools such as Qlik or Tableau?
Yes, RapidMiner Server sits in the background using Qlik. I know Qlik off the top of my head allows you to connect just a simple API call. What you would need to do is with RapidMiner Server is create a REST API, give that URL to Qlik, and then Qlik can interact with Qlik interact with Server. Yeah. Tableau, I believe it's a little bit trickier because you have to use their OData format. You have to do a little bit of more installation work, some binaries you have to install and so forth. But Qlik is the easiest by far.
Great. Another question here. For the dashboard, do you need RapidMiner desktop or is the dashboard accessible via the web?
No, you need to, the dashboard is only available if you have RapidMiner server. So if you have Studio and no server, you don't have the dashboard.
Okay, we have a bunch more questions coming in, so I'll go ahead and answer, try and ask them. So can you deploy the analytics apps as an edge application?
No, not to my knowledge. I don't think that's been tried. They can download the free version of Server and give it a try. And talk about it in the community. I would love to hear that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So another question here, will the graphs in the dashboards update automatically if the input data sources are continuously updated?
So what they would need to do is, they're not like a what's the word, like a push notification. No, that's not capable at this point, at this time. However, though, if they logged in or they click the refresh button, then it would automatically pull in all the latest data.
Great. Another question here. Can I share the dashboard with someone who does not have RapidMiner?
Yes, you would do that through the link below. You could either create it as a, sorry, let me go pull this up here real quick. You could do that through, let's come back to the app designer here. There's a way to do it either through a protected link. That means that they need a login, like right down here. This would be the link. Or you can give them, you would click on the access rights and assign it to anonymous, and that means anybody can access it if they have the link. Yeah.
Great, thanks. I have a few questions on this topic. Can I use Studio and use Power BI for the dashboard?
Well, you could technically use Studio and save it to some format that Power BI could use. I don't know enough about Power BI to really speak at length about it, but if Power BI were to be able to pull in a REST API, then you would probably do it with Server instead.
Okay, another question here. How are reoccurring jobs handled?
That's very, very simple. That's done through the cron job. So one thing I didn't show, and this is more about the deployment aspect, is we showed over here the run the process on the server here. But if I click on this one to schedule the process on the server, I would then come up with another dialog box where, you know, I could pick which server I want to run it on, and I can create a cron job, you know, either by manually entering the cron, if you're, you know, star, question mark, Monday to Friday, whatever it is, or just actually just toggle these on and then have it write it automatically, hit OK, and then run it.
Thanks, Tom. Another question here. How does this integrate with Hadoop or Redoop?
Actually, very good question. So RapidMiner Server, we've had clients that actually use Server in this capacity. They have a team of data scientists, and like any data scientist, they would love to get their hands on all the data in the Hadoop cluster and run, you know, jobs and all kinds of things. From a purely internal management style, they use RapidMiner Server as a gateway. So they use processes built in RapidMiner, deployed on the Hadoop cluster to do, you know, maybe ETL work or something like that, and then deliver the data sets to a folder, like a group folder, where the data scientists can then log into and pull the data and do whatever they want with it. We've seen, and that could be sitting on a separate machine. We've also seen clients install RapidMiner Server on an edge node of the Hadoop cluster, where they can then, you know, get more power from the memory and so forth, and be able to compute things that way, and also act as a governance tool between, you know, the users and the Hadoop cluster and so forth.
Great. Another question. So what about triggers for such schedules? Like, example, a script that fires off a job when a source updates?
So, yep, that's another great question. Touched on it a little bit here. If we go back to the sales server here real quick, there's a trigger folder over here, and what you can do is you can do two things as far as I can know right now. Is that you can have RapidMiner server monitor a directory, so if something gets dropped into that directory, like a file or something like that, it will then trigger a process to do something with that file or do something. Or you can actually set it up to monitor email attachments, so that if somebody sends an email attachment, like maybe the latest financial spreadsheet or whatever it is, it can load that, load the attachment in, do whatever processing, and downstream and deliver it how you want to deliver it.
Thanks, Tom. A few more questions we'll take now. So how big of a data set can I store in RapidMiner server?
So because of the way because the database that runs the backend of RapidMiner server, the data stores that you store on RapidMiner server are stored really in that backend database. So it really depends on how much size and space you have allocated for that database or what you have on your server. Of course, right, it does all its crunching in memory. So if you have room for several terabytes, and you want to use RapidMiner server to crunch all that terabyte data, you got to make sure that you have a strong enough server with good memory to do all that in. One note of caution is that RapidMiner server is not necessarily a replacement for a Hadoop cluster. It's really meant to really be between what you could do on your local laptop and a Hadoop cluster, and to be able to crunch more heavy data. I mean, in reality, the majority of users think they have big data. They may have other issues like wide data and so forth, but a RapidMiner server, they may think they need a Hadoop cluster, but in reality, RapidMiner server is really fits the bill for that.
Great. One more question here. How do you handle versioning control?
Oh, great question. So I touched a little bit on it. There's a built-in versioning control with RapidMiner server. If you're working on the server, you can we would open up a new window for, I forgot what it was called. I think it's called version, or it's called something else. And you can create a new version of the process, and it'll record every time you made a change to it, and then and who made the change and what date, and you can always open the old if you made a mistake, you can always open the old process and so forth and load that back in.
Great, thanks, Tom. So looks like we're just about at the top of the hour, so there are some questions that we weren't able to address, but we'll make sure to follow up with you guys via email as soon as possible with your questions. So thanks, Tom, and thanks again, everyone, for joining us for today's presentation, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Bye.